Hello, good evening everybody. Thank you all for coming tonight to a very special, very exciting event. I'm absolutely delighted to have Patssi Valdez from Asco, the exhibition that we're showing upstairs, here with us this evening. Patssi will be in conversation with Lucy Bradnock, who's a lecturer at the University of Nottingham in the Faculty of Arts. Following the conversation, where Patssi will talk a little bit about her own practice, the work of Asco, and maybe a little bit about what you're going to see this evening. So the conversation will be around 45 minutes, which will bring us up to 7:30, at which point we'll break for an interval. So an interval of 30 minutes to allow you to go and get a drink while we reconfigure things a little bit here. I would invite you all to be back in your seats at 8 o'clock, and then we will have the grand finale of the evening, the paper fashion show. So that's the run-through for this evening. I'd like to welcome our two speakers, and yes, thank you all for coming.
All right, these are on. Thanks, Emma, so much. And thank you so much, Patssi. It's such an honor to have you here in Nottingham. And Patsi's been in Nottingham for a few weeks now working on the paper fashion that we're going to see this evening. So it's been a wonderful treat, both for those of us who have seen the exhibition and also those who have been working with Patssi, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about that this evening. So what our aim is in this conversation is to give you all a little bit of context for the paper fashions that you're going to see a little bit later, so that as you're watching them, you have a bit of understanding really of where they came from and how they relate to Patsi's work in general, because fashion is not a new interest of yours, is it, at all? It's something that's really infused your work and the work of Asco for many decades, well, some decades now. Let's not make ourselves feel old. So I think maybe what we should do is start by almost going all the way back to the beginning, to when you were a teenager living in East Los Angeles in the late 1960s and into the early 1970s. So as a young girl, what did fashion mean to you?
Well, in the 60s, I was in elementary school. And in the 70s is when I was in high school. And basically, I just remember from being, well, first of all, I should say I grew up in a neighborhood and in a family. We didn't have much money. And I used to love clothing, and I would look at these beautiful jackets that were lying, and I'd go, "Oh, Mom, do you think you could buy me that jacket?" And she'd say, "I'm sorry, daughter, I just cannot afford it." So I don't know what it was about clothing. You know, I always wanted these things I could never have. So eventually, when I got connected with the Asco members, that allowed me the opportunity to make my own gowns, my own costumes out of found objects, out of scraps of fabric that I could then wear and pose in front of the camera. And I realized, I used to look at Vogue magazine a lot, International Vogue and regular Vogue, and I realized that a lot of those things were just posed. People didn't really look like that in real life. So that's sort of what I took on when I would gaze through the camera in the Asco days.
Yeah, that wonderful kind of glamorous vision of fashion magazines, I guess, and
Exactly.
they were almost kind of theatrical in that way. That those of you who've already seen the exhibition will have seen that wonderful theatrical, exuberant staging of your paper fashions upstairs.
But what I also want to say is that was one part of it, but then there was actually another intent behind that, because whenever I saw an image of a Mexican, we were either cleaning, doing gardening, or something labor-based. And I remember thinking, well, we are also beautiful, glamorous, interesting. Some of us are artists, some of us are writers, some of us are musicians. So what I did during those years, I tried to show a more eclectic, diverse view of what a Latina or a Mexican looks like. I tried to break the stereotype of what I used to see in the news or in the paper. So behind that gaze, I was also gazing out at the world through that lens, trying to change the perception of what a Mexican is.
So there was a sense in which there was a kind of almost a disconnect between the people that you knew who were glamorous and beautiful and interested in fashion and that the way in which they were shown in the media.
Yeah, well, the media always liked to show the dark side, the gang members or the, you know, just the dark side. I never saw anything positive. So that was why I dressed up and acted out these different roles during my years with Asco.
Yeah, and so there's a kind of use of photography and performance and that glamour. Would you say that you were almost trying to kind of reclaim that territory and show people that there was that kind of glamorous, exciting side as well as the kind of stereotypes in the media?
Exactly, and I was also, that beauty comes in different colors. It's not just one color, and it doesn't look just one way. So the goal was to sort of break the stereotype. Even though I know I went to extremes in the way I dressed up, but I also, the other intent was I felt that I needed to shock my audience so that maybe then, once I got your attention, then maybe you might listen to what I had to say. So that was the other thing.
Yeah.
I needed to be noticed so that I could voice my opinion.
So there's a kind of demanding of attention, or that sounds quite negative actually, doesn't it? Sorry, but kind of grabbing attention through that kind of posing in that fashion.
Exactly.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the kind of look that you have in some of the Asco images that we're seeing up here, because it's an incredibly striking look and very kind of bold makeup.
So in this image here, I'm playing the universe, and that's sort of the beginning of using cardboard and glitter and, you know, sort of party favors. So this was the Day of the Dead thing that we have in Los Angeles, and I thought, I think I'm going to go as the universe.
An ambitious costume.
And then after many years of being in front of the camera, I remember I was starting to age. I thought, okay, when I hit 30, that's it, no more pictures. And so then I picked up the camera, and then I started photographing my friends. And we'll see some images that will be projected up there of Dee Dee and Betty, and friends that were writers, aspiring actresses, things like that.
And so did you feel in some way that you were kind of almost giving them a voice, kind of depicting them in these very kind of strong images?
I definitely did. I thought it was my job to capture the beauty of my friends, and then, well, you know, I'm young, I'm a little naive, and capture the beauty of my culture and share it with the world. And that was one of my goals. Now, that is not an image of beauty up there. That is a performance during the Asco days. So yeah, I felt like it was my job to do that.
To almost make, I feel like there's a kind of way in which you're making an alternative kind of image culture.
Definitely.
Almost as a response then to those fashion magazines and those films that maybe don't represent your culture
at all.
And have a very kind of narrow, I think we all can agree, quite a narrow version of beauty that they're portraying.
But also a very narrow version of Mexicans. I mean, I think not much has changed, actually. I'm still waiting for that to happen. I don't know if I'm waiting, but I don't think much has changed as far as a depiction of my culture. I think it's stayed pretty much the same.
And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about, so those kind of early costumes that you were making, as you mentioned, made out of cardboard and found materials. So what does that mean then, making fashion, and of course this evening's fashion made out of paper and other kind of materials? What does that mean, making what really looks like high fashion and kind of incredible, almost film costumes out of these very everyday materials?
Well, how it happened actually, it was Gronk, who's one of the members of the group. I just remember we'd sort of would hang out, have coffee, and then one day he said, let's do a paper fashion show. So it was almost like a dare. So a whole group of artists there was a group of us beyond Asco who said, okay, let's do that. And the only thing you could use was paper. So it was very interesting because when you're limited that way in your materials, it really makes you think out of the box, and you start experimenting with this material. And that's when I made, I have a recreation in the fashion show of that particular gown. So I learned how to pleat the paper and crunch it, and then we did this paper fashion show, and that's what's in the gallery right now. I was asked if I could sort of give a semblance of what that paper fashion show looked like, or make it dimensional. And I haven't worked in paper in years because, to be perfectly honest, I'm a practicing full-time painter. And so it was a bit of a challenge for me. And so these pieces you're going to see today I had to sort of remember and sort of relearn what I had done like 30 years ago. So it was quite a challenge, and it was quite interesting, but I was also very fortunate to have a Nottingham artist, Nadeem, as my assistant. He was brilliant, and he made my life so much easier. I thought we made a great team. I was telling him he's an honorary Asco member, and so that was really exciting to collaborate with a younger artist.
And you worked as well on those with some local students as well, and I know that you've
right.
done that before in Los Angeles as well. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that kind of collaborative process, maybe?
Well, I didn't do it in Los Angeles. I was in Mexico City because the show traveled to Mexico City a couple of months ago. I was there and I did a workshop, but I didn't create any fashions. I just showed the participants the foundation work, how to construct one very loosely. And these young, well, not young, they were all ages, came up with some amazing creations. And I actually learned by watching them. And then now I got to have hands-on doing my own creations here in Nottingham.
So would you say that there's a sense in which those kinds of physical constraints that the material gives you, a bit like the kind of economic constraints that you faced originally, force almost a kind of creativity, that you're forced to problem solve and learn these new techniques to deal with it?
That's exactly what happened. And then then Nadine would say, oh, look, I have this packaging material. And I thought, oh, that's great, let's spray it gold. And then we started using other materials that I had never used before. So it's been quite exciting and interesting.
So quite a kind of material adventure.
Now we want to keep adding. I thought, oh, we have to add, we already thought up some more costumes because this show's going to travel to 2 other venues. And I felt like we just got warmed up. Now we want to create a few more
A whole
pieces.
kind of army of costumes.
Exactly.
That would be
But
wonderful.
the other idea that I had recently is now this has led to one of the last gowns you'll see in the fashion show this evening. I thought it would be really incredible to maybe make it out of laser cut metal or aluminum and make a big sculpture piece that could sit in a stately home in the garden. So that's something I'm really thinking about doing.
I know that when we spoke a few weeks ago, you were imagining it as an outdoor sculpture at Chatsworth.
That's
which would
where
just be really an incredible thing to see.
The
I
black
think we'd all love
gown
that.
would look great there.
And so that black gown, which we'll see after the interval, I feel like we're trailing these really fabulous outfits.
Oh, I wanted to say something about the black gown because I'm in England and I thought, here I am, I have to do a queen. So that's our, Nadine and I's interpretation of a queen gown. I mean, it was essential that I do that while I was here. I think that's a great thing about going to different countries and different cities. I mean, you learn about, you learn a lot about the culture. And in Los Angeles, we don't have such old historic buildings as you have here. So for me, it was really inspiring.
Yeah, and the queen is, we'll see that fabulous kind of bejeweled queen dress a little bit later. And then, so one of the other dresses is the virgin dress. So maybe, I love the way that you've sort of got this English culture with the queen and the history of this country that you're visiting, and then you've sort of recreated and brought your own culture almost to England, which maybe some of us are less familiar with. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that costume came into being?
Well, in my culture, the Virgen of Guadalupe is a big deal. She is like an icon, almost become like a pop icon now. So in one of the Asco performances, I actually dressed up as the Virgen of Guadalupe, but a bit really differently. I wore black glitter, and I made these, she has these rays that sort of stick out, and I made that out of cardboard and aluminum foil. But anyway, I was here, and since this Asco show is here, and I did that during the Asco years, I thought, I need to make a Virgen for Nottingham. So we made a recreation of the Virgen, and this one is it's a bit rigid, this one. She, her costume is very structured. But I'm happy with it.
And so that's a recreation of pretty much of the costume that you made for Walking Mural,
exactly.
Right? That was you and Gronk and Willie Heron.
Yeah, what happened is in East Los Angeles, we used to have a Christmas parade that went down the main street, Whittier Boulevard. And then there were these riots that happened in, I think it was the 69 or 70.
It was 70. The Chicano moratorium.
Exactly. And so during the riots, some of our better stores on Whittier Boulevard got burnt down or looted, and it was just a huge mess. And we had some really beautiful stores, lovely stores. And after that, the shopkeepers moved out. And then the Christmas parade was taken away. So the group, the Asco group, we decided that we wanted to recreate the parade for the people. So that's when I dressed up as a Virgen, and Gronk was a big, he came in chiffon, as a big Christmas tree. And then Willie looked like he played I don't know, he had all these suffering figures on this big panel on his back, made out of aluminum foil, and I think it was masonite panel. It was amazing. So we walked through the streets of East Los Angeles. I think we sort of horrified the neighborhood.
I was going to say,
more than made them happy.
What was the...
I could hear women going in Spanish, like, what would they? They were just going, oh, Dios mío, like, dear God, what is this? Dios mío, they were saying. I could hear them gasping. But I'm in character, so I knew that I just needed to walk straight ahead and not make eye contact with anybody. And then that was our performance, and then it got documented. But also in the neighborhood, the police presence was very dominant. I don't know if you know about Rodney King when he got beaten up. Well, that happened in my neighborhood all the time. Only when Rodney King incident happened, I thought, finally with cell phones, somebody documented it. Because you could say it, but people wouldn't believe you until now there was evidence of it. I thought, oh, that happens all the time. So the other scary thing was we had to be very careful because the police, they were circling as we were walking, but we walked on the sidewalk, we weren't causing any harm, and we had to be very careful, you know, about we could possibly get beaten up by the police.
Mm-hmm. And those were issues that you faced, the four of you really, with all of those Asco performances in the first few years of kind of into the mid-1970s, that kind of need to do things quickly.
Yes, well, what we thought is that we saw the neighborhood as a stage with a built-in audience. So we took the art to the people instead of making the people come to the art, which they might not have done. So we thought we'll bring the art to them. And I think that was a really good thing.
And did they always seem so kind of surprised and stunned as they did with Walking Mural?
Well,
what kind of reaction did you get?
Sometimes, actually, the younger people remember it, and it was exciting, and maybe it inspired them. But we would, like, we had lunch on an island in the middle of the street, but we strategically planned it out. Like, we'd have the costumes, everything in the car, we'd zoom to the location. It was usually a very important location. Like Harry had mentioned that there was when the riots happened, someone got murdered in that particular place. So anyway, we had lunch on the island. It was called our supper after a major riot, and then we'd document, get our stuff, jump in the car, and then zoom away. And then we also did the instant mural, where what was going on in that era, there were a lot of murals going up in the neighborhood, and a lot of those people that were putting up those murals were not artists. They had political things to say, but some of that work was really bad. So we decided, instead of putting an eyesore on the wall, we'd make a statement, use our bodies as the art, and then you could tear us off the wall, and then we didn't leave a mark.
Yeah. No one would have to suffer bad political painting.
Exactly.
It's very considerate of you. And so there's a sense, I think those of you who have seen the images of those performances, the photographs in the exhibition upstairs, will know you're such a kind of striking figure in so many of those. And it's interesting to me that the kind of speed with which something like Last Supper after a major riot, kind of in and out, almost hit and run tactics.
Very quickly.
And yet you all look so beautifully kind of made up, and your costumes are so elaborate. So I'm kind of interested in this idea of the kind of costumes and the importance of those, which kind of drawing on that Catholic imagery, but also they seem a little bit science fiction maybe, and a little bit glam rock. So what other kinds of references were you bringing into those?
To be perfectly honest, let's just say we're Asco right now, you and I, because there was 4 of us. We'd sit around, we'd have a dialogue about issues that were on our mind, maybe, so then we'd sort of map out a plan. Okay, tomorrow we're going to go to this certain location and we're going to set up a scene and document and then zoom away. So here we are. So I just start maybe grabbing these red flowers, and then it was very spontaneous. It was very tactile. It wasn't, we just started creating our own persona, and then we'd put everything in the car and then take the photograph. So I have to also state that a lot of it was fun. We were playing, we were experimenting. It wasn't so serious all the time. You know, we were just exploring and creating.
Yeah, I think that's a sense that really comes out in some of those no movie images in particular, that actually that kind of exuberance and fun.
And then there was a dark side to it as far as my part, because people go, oh my God, you're being tired. I have to admit, I have a difficult time looking at some of those images from my youth. I was, came from, in my home there was alcoholism, there was a lot of darkness that took place in my childhood. And also the other thing that would happen as a young girl, I always wanted to voice I had something to say, and I was either told, shh, 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 be quiet. You were supposed to be proper, keep your mouth shut, and whatever. So I remember feeling really like repressed or censored as a young woman. So when you see some of these very dark images of me in these photographs, it's because I'm acting out. Like I felt like my mouth was covered, so you'll see me with tape on my mouth, or I felt restricted, or so, because a lot of feminists would say, well, why did you allow those men to do that to you? And I said, nobody did anything to me. I chose to do that because that's the way I felt at that time. I felt restricted, censored, and I had to make art about what I was feeling at the time. So there was playfulness, there was glamour, there was some darkness, there was social concerns, political concerns, role playing. A lot was going on in that time, in that group for me.
I think that's actually a question that a lot of people have, is what it was like being the only female member of this, collaborative group. Do you feel like your voice was heard within the group?
I did. I always felt equal in the group. I sort of don't feel that after the fact now, but at the time, I totally felt equal. And it made me stronger because I had to stand my ground. I had to sort of be as, strong as they were. But I had things to say, and nobody was going to censor me in my art practice. And that's why I became an artist in the first time. I remember in elementary school, I'll be quick, that I had made a piece of art. I think I was really young, and my piece got chosen to be hung on the wall. So during open house, all the parents come and look at the work. And I was a very shy and very quiet child. And everybody made a big fuss. And it excited me, but it terrified me at the same time. And then when the show was over and the teachers gave me my piece of work, I got the work and I quietly left the classroom, and the first trash can I saw, I threw it in the trash because it scared me so much that this little piece of art could give me so much attention. I didn't know how to handle it. I just thought maybe I'd get rid of it. They'll leave me alone. And I know it sounds quite tragic, but on the flip side of that, later on I realized the power of art, that through art I could voice my opinions, voice my concerns, and through art I found my voice. And I also thought that art actually helped. I'm working with a young graffiti artist recently, and his name's Vile Reyes, and I went up to his art table, and he had a sticker there, and it said, "Art saved my life." And I'm probably 30 years older than him. And I looked, I go, "Oh my God, Vile, it saved yours also?" So basically, you know, art is such an important tool for troubled teens or people can't find their voice. I just think it's a really great outlet. And unfortunately, we're in Los Angeles, they've taken it out of the schools. They don't think it's really important, and it's a shame. And I feel so fortunate that I went to school in a time where I could make art on a regular basis.
Which is a wonderful thing, because I think we hear quite a lot about you know, how kind of maybe disadvantaged East Los Angeles was at that time. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting that actually you had that one advantage, which was the ability to kind of find art and make art at school and discover that kind of power and that voice.
I was so fortunate all the way from from elementary when I threw that picture out. I don't even think my mom knows that story. Oh. I probably wouldn't want to break her heart. Anyway, and then through junior high, I remember my teacher, Ms. Haas, she'd run up and down on the tables with this big hairdo wrapped in a knot. And I remember with all these bracelets, I remember looking at Miss Haas. And she kept me after school one day. And I thought, if I come home late, my mother's going to have a fit. So she said, "Young lady, you could be an A student, but you need to focus and stop talking to all the boys." And I remember, but you know, it was when I looked at her and she said that to me, I thought, oh, maybe it was a really good feeling that someone said that to me. You know, my mom was always busy working, my dad wasn't there, so someone noticed that I had a special ability. And fortunately, that also happened in high school. I had a teacher who mentored me. Well, I was given an assignment, and I wanted to impress my Mr. Ramirez, because he was a real practicing artist. So the assignment was to go home and do some drawing. And he said, "And don't copy anything." Well, I looked in a big fat, it was a dictionary, and it was a little tiny black and white drawing, and I looked at it and I used it as reference. And it was gorgeous. I took it to class, and he recognized it, and he gave me a big fat F. Fail. And I'm like, but you know what? I thought, no, I'm not going to give up. He didn't humiliate me. That was humiliating. And I wanted to please him so badly. So I took his class again. And I thought, I'm going to prove to this man that I'm a good artist. And I ended up being very close to this teacher. And he mentored me through high school, and then it continued through college, and I've been very fortunate to have mentors throughout my life.
So in a sense, I feel like the story of you throwing away that drawing would be tragic were it not for the fact that you went on and actually became an artist, I think it would be incredibly sad if you'd stopped there. But somehow the fact that that realization made you decide to, you know, kind of keep at it.
Oh, but what I want to say is that there was a point in my life where I hated the fact that I needed to make art. I just didn't like, I just thought, why can't I just not care about things? Why do I have to care about this stuff? And then there came a point where I made peace with that, and then I embraced it and I accepted it, and then that became my practice. But I also believe that it's genetic, because I come from a family of people who couldn't practice the craft, but my uncles were photographers. One aunt could have been a designer. I had an aunt who paints and sculpts, but they had to raise their families, so they couldn't do it full time. So basically, I think I'm the outcome of
all of those lines coming and converging
together, and I'm the one who actually practiced it and made it a full-time career.
Yeah, and it's been really wonderful to see, and we'll see some of the fruits of that in a little bit.
One facet.
One facet. Well, that's kind of an interesting, the idea of you sort of coming back to this medium several decades after you last made it. So is there a way in which, and you were saying that, you know, actually what you normally, you know, do most now is painting. Is there a similarity between those two things? Do you feel like you were entirely shifting gear into paper fashion, or is there a kind of, I'm looking actually at the sort of swirls beneath our feet on the catwalk.
Well, there's the pieces, some of them are hand painted with sumi ink, but basically I've been starting to sculpt. So I feel like these paper garments are more sculptural. So that was the exciting thing for me, that it feels like sculpture, which is a place I want to explore.
And I feel like we almost see the kind of genesis of that in some of those very early Asco costumes, that very kind of sculptural approach.
And you know, I never thought about it like that before until just recently, that those pieces are sculptural. Yeah. I had never thought about it like that.
They seem these wonderful moments where performance and photography and sculpture and fashion all kind of merge in this really exciting kind of public space.
And I'm really happy with the models that are going to be wearing the gowns today. I'm really excited about the event.
Yeah, it's going to be fabulous. Well, I know that we're kind of keeping an eye on time, because we've been talking a lot about these really magnificent dresses, and I know that you all actually want to see them instead of just hearing us describe them. The models have very carefully put them on, but I know that we're going to take a 30-minute break, which will kind of enable us to prepare for the fashion show. It just remains to say thanks very much for giving us a bit of an insight into kind of where that practice comes from, and it's nice to situate it a little bit in terms of, you know, your life and your approach to art and the history of Asco, but also all of those other things to do with you as a person. It's really, really nice to hear about that, so that we can actually, you know, begin to see those in context. I know that you also probably need a little bit of a snack. It's been a long day. Patsy's been here all day setting this up. So. And
I want to thank everyone for coming, and I hope you enjoy the fashion show.
Well, thanks very much, Patsy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you very much, Patsy. So if we can all be back in our seats at 8 o'clock for the fashion show, that would be brilliant.